Roar like a lion.
You know, even though she was born, we were grieving throughout the whole process because of things that were out of our control that had, you know, potentially catastrophic results, right? And so I think for any parent out there who's dealing with, you know, the health struggle of their child, they can fully relate to that.
So you think the Democratic Party cares about Black people? Believe it or not, Rex, I think that tweet is part of the problem. Do you feel like we could have addressed this homeless issue much sooner? You have to speak a word, make it a good one.
Okay, let's go.
Once again, I am Jackie Ray, and welcome back to The Word. I am very excited and honored to do this podcast because I think it's so important to families, and this is really a testament of how you can turn a tragedy into something special. So I am honored and humbled that you guys took time out to come onto the show. Make sure you check out Laura's story. This is a beautiful story of overcoming tragedy, like I said. But joining me now is Amy Juan and Jonar de Guzman. I am so excited to have them on the show. So let's just start at the beginning for those that might not have read Laura's story. But I want to start at the very beginning because I know often for couples, there's that joy when you find out you're pregnant. So I wanted to start there when you first found out you were pregnant. Was it expected? Was it planned?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we actually had been trying for a while. We wanted a sibling for our son, Thompson. And, you know, it just miraculously it happened. I didn't think it was going to happen that month because we were doing like a detox cleanse, but it did. And, you know, there's a whole story about how we came up with the name Sedona that Jonar can get into.
Well, so, I mean, I think it's important to kind of understand the conditions behind like when Sedona was conceived because it was right at the start of the pandemic. And, you know, like my wife just mentioned, we have a toddler and we wanted him to have a sibling. So through all that, and I work as a physician in the hospital, going through COVID, taking care, and how scary all that was initially, that was like the environment that we were trying to have this kid. And it was very stressful, you know, very stressful. But it ended up happening towards the end of the winter of 2021. But like my wife just mentioned, we didn't have a name prepared. We knew it was going to be a girl, and so we were like, why don't we just take a trip? We took a baby moon to Sedona.
Oh.
And so I don't know if you've ever been.
I have been.
You have.
Absolutely
so it's
gorgeous.
Just
Yes.
magical. It's a magical city. If you know you
Doesn't
haven't
feel
been,
real.
yeah, it doesn't feel real. It really feels like a mystical city beyond like this world we live in. And just with, you know, the colorful rock formations, it just felt like the right name because it represents beauty, mysticism, and strength. And that's what Sedona meant to all of us on her, you know, her short life here. She represented beauty and strength despite all the challenges she faced, even early on.
We literally were in the SUV. Jonar was driving. You know, I was on my phone Googling flower names, and I was like, nah, none of these really work. And he goes, how about Dona? I was like, I don't like Dona, but I'll do Sedona.
Right.
Like, it just,
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So now, as you're going through your pregnancy, I'm assuming all the checkups were perfectly fine and there was no indication that anything was wrong?
Yeah.
Everything was perfect and normal. And even the day before she was born, I had an ultrasound and it was totally normal. I mean, she was breech, but it was normal.
Right. So when you are going through, what was the next step that you realized, okay, something might not be okay?
Yeah. So I own my own company. It's like a mobile gaming company, and we were working remotely at the time. So I was just at home in the office. I was like interviewing engineers that day, and I just remember having these like contractions, but I was like, oh, this can't be anything because it's too early. It was like 29 weeks, right? And so I was like, oh, it must be Braxton Hicks contractions. Like, I'm just going to take it easy, you know? And when Jonar came home from work that day, he walked in around like 5:30, and I was like literally on like a Microsoft Teams call with my business partner discussing the candidates we had interviewed that day and telling him, like, if you see me closing my eyes, it's because I'm having contractions. And I'm just like trying to work through it, you know? And so that conversation ended. And then I was like, I got to sit down for a bit. And at 6 o'clock, I was like, well, I got to start dinner. But before I went to start dinner, I went to use the restroom and I realized I was bleeding.
Okay.
And so I called Jonar over. I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to be bleeding. And, you know, Jonar sometimes, like, even if he's panicking inside, he's very calm and he holds it together. He's
That
like,
is helpful sometimes.
I didn't know what was
That's what I do
happening.
for a living.
Right.
I was just like, maybe we should go to the hospital. So we dropped our son off at our neighbor's house. And at this point, the contractions were it was just like irregular and all over the place. I was like, okay, like it's not actual labor. And we drove to his hospital, Providence Little Company of Mary in Torrance. And like as we're driving, the contractions go from irregular to regular, and they're every 3 minutes, then they're every 2 minutes. And in my mind, I was freaking out because I was like, it's too early to have this baby. Like, we can't have this baby today. But I was like, oh my God, we might have this baby today.
Right. Total fear. But the physician in you had to be thinking what right now? Were you panicked or were you, like Amy said, completely calm?
No, I was very much panicked, and I knew she was going to deliver, even though, you know, I felt those same sentiments that Amy had, that it can't happen. You know, this is our baby. It's too early. But my physician side said, this is happening. We got to get her to the hospital as soon as possible. And we did. And fortunately, we got there in time, because when we did get into the room in labor and delivery, the baby's vital signs, the heart rate was fluctuating a lot. And that's usually a sign of distress. And so when the on-call doctor came in, saw what was happening, he was wearing a mask, but I could just tell in his eyes. And even just, you know, him not really moving much, I'm like, this baby needs to come out. And so he told us, he's like, we got to take her to the OR.
But she made it.
She did. She did make it.
And then when she made it, everything seemed fine as well, right? Until the brain injury?
Yeah. So basically, the first 2 days we were kind of walking on eggshells, because at that age, 29 weeks, their lungs aren't fully developed. They need supplemental oxygen to help them breathe, and that's what was happening for Sedona. There's usually 3 common complications for preemies that, you know, most preemies don't get, but they're common enough that they pop up. So there's something that can happen with the gut, something that can happen with the eyes, and then something that can happen with the brain. And unfortunately for Sedona, it was the brain.
So the second morning, the NICU doctor walked in, and, you know, he said that some things were off. So they were going to do a lot of checks, her heart, her brain, everything. So the next couple of hours, they were doing all those checks. And then we found out that basically she had a grade 4 intraventricular hemorrhage, which is basically a brain bleed. There's, you know, for those types of bleeds, there's grade 1 to grade 4. Grade 4 is the most serious. So hers was the most serious. And because of that great brain bleed, it was only on the right side. So the right side of your brain affects the left side of your body, right? And so, you know, there was a whole thing we did about talking with the doctors in terms of, you know, will she be able to walk? Will she be able to talk? You know, she's going to have weakness in the left side of her body. But before we even got to that, like, we had to get her transferred from Little Company of Mary over to Miller's Children's Hospital out here in Long Beach, because they had the proper pediatric specialist that could, you know, look after her and do the neurological and neurosurgery consults.
So it seems like from the time you started having these contractions to the time we're talking about now, you had no mental downtime to just kind of take a breath.
No, there was none at all. I mean, it felt like 5 to 10 years elapsed within those 72 hours.
I will also say that, you know, I didn't find this out until much later when Jonar was talking to his sister, but there was actually a point in the OR that Jonar thought both Sedona and I wouldn't make it. I had a placental abruption.
Oh my goodness.
And so, you know, sometimes with placental abruptions, the mothers go too. So I was very lucky.
So as a physician, and you knowing that, your emotions had to be all over the place.
They were. It was crazy. I mean, I'm laughing about it now, but there was definitely a lot of tears throughout that whole time, and even throughout the night into the early morning. Yeah, it was just very scary. And that those times that I felt like that were even before they went to the OR. You know, when I saw all the bleeding and then saw the on-call doctor's face, I knew it was very serious, and that there could be potential that maybe we lose both of them. Who knows? You know, we didn't know that this was going to happen, and we have no control over all these things. So yeah, it was a very uncertain and tumultuous time.
So take me to the diagnosis of the cerebral palsy and what brought that about and how you were feeling when you received that diagnosis.
You know, Sedona spent nearly 6 months in Miller's, and because of the brain bleed, she was always at high risk for cerebral palsy. A lot of kids don't even get cerebral palsy, an actual cerebral palsy diagnosis until even several years later. But for her, because, you know, it was very obvious that she could move her right side, but had very limited movement in her left, her neurologist diagnosed her pretty early on. The funny thing is, we didn't even know that she had an official diagnosis. Like, I just happened to be looking through my chart app at her, like, the last appointment write-up, and I saw it, and I was like, oh. And then I, you know, called the neurologist. I was like, oh, like, what's this, you know? And yeah.
It wasn't an actual conversation before you had to initiate the conversation?
You know, I think it's hard. You know, in those early days, it was literally like a doctor's appointment every day, every couple days. And I think there was just so much that we were sorting through that maybe perhaps they didn't tell us, or they kind of maybe assumed that we were already expecting it. But, you know, the good thing is that, you know, once you get the diagnosis, and I hear that some parents have to fight for a diagnosis, it is good to actually get it, because at that point, then services start kicking in, and you are much more able to advocate on behalf of your child for the things that they need.
Were you prepared for any of this?
I think, I don't know, I would say on like my side of things, I was, because of how extensive the brain bleed was. You know, we, as Amy alluded to early on, the first like couple weeks that Sedona was at Miller's in the NICU, we met with their whole medical team, which included the brain doctor that ended up, you know, helping to give her the diagnosis. And they told us flat out, we don't know if she's going to be able to walk. We don't know if she's going to be able to use her left arm or her left leg. And that alone is implying that she will likely suffer from some form of cerebral palsy at some point down the road. And so I think for both of us, we kind of expected it. We didn't know it was going to be this early, but that it was coming. It was in the works for her.
And, you know, there were little hints along the entire way. When we were in the hospital, she had a physical therapist in the NICU, right? And so the physical therapist would always tell us, you know, Sedona has torticollis, which is like a preference, a head preference. Okay. You know, she would tell us, you know, like she really needs to be able to lift her head up more, do more tummy time, things like that. So we knew it was a possibility. It wasn't completely unexpected. But at the same time, I will say that, you know, because we had these conversations starting very early on, the team at Miller's told us about the concept of neuroplasticity. And when I was asking them, you know, what will she be like when she's older? What is her potential? I remember one of the NICU doctors told me that we don't know right now, that early intervention is super important, and that he has seen miraculous things, and that one day if Sedona walked into his office and he saw her walking, he wouldn't be surprised either, you know? And so like 1 week into our NICU stay, Jonar's brother-in-law basically sent us 4 books on neuroplasticity in children.
And what is neuroplasticity for our listeners?
Yeah, so neuroplasticity is essentially the concept that your brain can your whole brain and nervous system is made up of these things called neurons, which are just nerves. And sometimes those can get damaged. So what ends up happening is your brain and your nervous system in the body can make up and compensate for that by making new connections around the damaged ones. That's essentially what neuroplasticity is. So that can happen throughout life, but it happens more prominently with babies and toddlers that their bodies are still growing. Everything's still growing, especially like the nervous system. So like, for example, in Sedona's case, the damage was on the right side of her brain, and usually the way that the body works, your motor function, so your ability to move, it operates such that the left side is controlled by the right side of the brain. And because of the damage, that's why her left side was affected. But as Amy is alluding to, my brother-in-law sent us all these books talking about how it is possible to attain this neuroplasticity in kids even as young as Sedona if they enroll in these specific therapies. And so we early on, even when she was still in the NICU, Amy and I started reading all these books, and ideas started popping up in our heads about what we could do for her to help mitigate those potential diagnoses and those limitations.
It's so interesting because I appreciate you sharing your story on social media, because I'm looking at you, specifically one where Sedona was rolling over and she did like 2 rolls. and it was, if I hadn't read Laura's story, it would have just looked like a mom videotaping their normal kid doing normal baby stuff.
Right.
It didn't look like anything was abnormal. So that's one of those things where, do you feel like sometimes people from the outside looking in, they don't really see what's going on, and that's why maybe you need that kind of ability to advocate sooner, because you just don't know what's going on with your child sometimes. If it hadn't been for this brain bleed and then the diagnosis, like you just don't, do you feel like sometimes parents don't have enough information?
I mean, I didn't even know, right? And, I already have a kid, but you find that with special needs kids, with neurodivergent kids, normal kids, you celebrate every milestone that they achieve. In our community, we celebrate what we call every inch stone, and it can be everything from making a new sound to, her, having a flat instead of a fisted hand, or, the fact that maybe she sits up by herself for 1 second and then 5 and then 15, every little tiny thing is cause for a big celebration.
Now, as you're going through this process, I know you joined support groups and things of that nature. I read that you found that there were people who had to drive 4 hours. That seems, it sounds almost impossible when you have to work, and then maybe what if you have other children? It seems like such an impossible task. So how did hearing the stories of other people kind of inspire you to make obviously her life already meant something because she overcame so much, but how did hearing the stories of other people inspire you to take another step in being a blessing to those other people?
I mean, I think Jonar and I have always recognized that, Sedona was very lucky, I think, to be born into our family. First of all, the state of California is very good for special needs kids. Jonar and I, professionally, we've come a long way, and so we were able to have that financial basis to explore a lot of different cutting edge therapies, but also just in our backgrounds, right? Like Jonar is a physician, and so every time I felt like I didn't know how to talk to a particular doctor, or the doctor would say something and I was like, okay, well, this is really over my head. I need you to translate this for me. That helped me. I mean, I was a bio major, but even some of the stuff was very much over my head, right? For me, I'm an attorney, but I also have my own technology company. And so on one hand, the attorney part of me was like, okay, let's find a way to like break through all the bureaucracy, because there is so much bureaucracy. And yes, there are a lot of resources provided by the state, but it's very hard to know what you're even entitled to, right? And, we're both native English speakers. For some other family where if English is not their first language, or if they don't speak English, or, like I was able to take, time off from my job to sit every day with her in the NICU for almost 6 months. But I saw a lot of other families, a lot of other moms who they couldn't. They had to do their jobs to, put bread on the table, to, to watch their other kids because they might have other kids at home. So I think our circumstances are particularly fortunate. And then, the last part is just that, because I have a background in technology, we just thought that by combining all our expertise, it would be very beneficial for families if they could hear all of, how to advocate for their children from a lawyer's perspective, from a doctor's perspective, and then use technology to like amplify and scale that message.
That was the goal, to kind of help circle back and help people after Sedona had grown up. So when you're thinking about the future like that, and that's a goal for later on in life, and then suddenly it becomes a goal right now, how do you navigate that mentally? Because it seems like she was here for 17 months, and even sitting across from you guys right now and looking at your faces, and both of you obviously, and I know a child is so much joy. I don't have children of my own, but I have a goddaughter. That's my whole world. But so just the joy that I feel radiating from you right now is so admirable. I that you guys,
thank you,
just are just strong and pillars of light. And how do you navigate that though? How do you not take a mental break for self and just kind of sit in that and process everything that's happened to you, but instead you guys are thinking about other people?
Yeah, I know. It seems almost counterintuitive, but there is this love that we have for her, and she had so much strength, and I feel like that is now placed upon us to give to other people. And I think that, like, yeah, we're still grieving. I'm not gonna lie to you. There's times, even like last night, where I was like, it's so strange she's gone, but like, I feel the strength that she had when she was here. It's like transferred into me. I said during my speech for the eulogy for the funeral service that she may be gone, but her energy lives on through all of us. And I think that has carried me through days after she passed away, but it feels even stronger now.
Yes.
And I don't know if you can feel it.
I
But
definitely can.
I can even feel it. And I think that's what drives me. And, to answer your question, you asked a couple questions ago about like what motivates us. I mean, just our experience alone, like a doctor and a lawyer, we had problems navigating the system. What more for someone who's maybe a single mom and she's not even in healthcare? What for her, And every kid, every baby, every family deserves the best shot possible. That's what drives me, and that's how I'm able to channel, a lot of that grief too. I transform it to just giving the love and strength to like other people. And hopefully through this foundation that, we'll launch, we will be able to do that for now into the future.
So let's go to the foundation.
Yeah.
You started the GoFundMe and received almost instantaneous feedback and people donating. Were you surprised by that? Because you got what, was it $20,000?
It was $40,000 the first day, but who's counting?
Man, I'm counting. I think a lot of people, that's amazing. Were you surprised? $40,000 in one day.
Oh, I remember when I was setting up the GoFundMe, I was like, Jonar, how much should we say is the goal? And I was like, what if we only raise like $1,000? So I think I only started at like 5 or 10,000 because I was like, I don't know if we'll even get this much,
Because I mean, like in the context of like the pandemic, I feel like the GoFundMes have just like been through the roof for all different causes, right? And we see how they go, and I'm like, kind of just maybe we should just make it a lower amount depending on how it does. And we were just floored at how much we received in such a short period of time.
But I think your cause is so worthy, number one. And then so ultimately you raised, was it 101,000 or is it still going?
I think, well, technically it's still going. We haven't taken it down, but I think if you count, because there's some people who have given us checks and not put it in the GoFundMe. So I think we're technically over 115,000 right now.
And you're using that to kickstart this foundation, right? So tell us a little bit about the foundation.
We're basically trying to structure and memorialize everything that we've learned. And so, we've basically partitioned it into 3 of the most important things that we thought were helpful. So the first part is generally advocacy, right? It's nursing advocacy, it's parent advocacy. Sedona had this incredible nurse, Trish, who, coincidentally was there at her birth. She was the charge nurse, and she was her home nurse, and she was there at her passing. And Trish, when she first came to us, she was so passionate about, basically the post-NICU life for a lot of these babies, to make sure that they have the resources that they need, to make sure that the parents feel comfortable with what they're doing. So she's already, volunteered and agreed to be leading that modality. And that's part and parcel with the parent advocacy modality, which is, there's so much that you don't know, right? And I used to always liken basically running Sedona's schedule like the CEO of my company.
Right.
Like it's literally what it felt like, right? And so I think there's a lot of lessons for parents to learn, for nurses to learn, but also for parents to be able to find that nursing care, because it took us a while to get it, and we had to find her and, basically treat her as a nanny until we were able to wade through all the bureaucracy to truly treat her like a nurse. The second part is early intervention therapy. Before Sedona left the NICU, I had her on every single therapy center wait list, right? And I was very adamant about finding the right therapist for her. There's a lot of great therapists out there, but it was about finding the one that she responded to. So we started off in traditional PT and OT. And, I would say even for therapists, there's the right therapist for your child at the right time. I actually brought her to Napa pretty early on. When she was discharged from the hospital, she was not ready. She was just not ready. And so we started off in traditional physical therapy because it was a little bit less intense for her. We waited for her to get stronger. Then we found the most amazing OT, Dr. Marielli from Theraplay. And with her, we started doing high frequency in early intervention therapy. She's an hour away. We drove her there 3 times a week.
Oh, wow.
And
Through LA traffic.
Yeah.
So you know that
Lot of stop.
yeah.
Not much go.
But we could literally see the improvement, right? And once she got strong enough from Theraplay, then we were able to do drop-ins at Napa Center, which there's only I think 7 or 8 Napa centers in the entire world. We're so lucky that there's one in LA. And, Sedona did okay, I would say, with traditional PT and OT. But what we found was remarkable, very fast improvement through something called DMI, Dynamic Movement Intervention. Okay. It's different from, more traditional types of therapy because you're asking the kid to support themselves instead of in the traditional sense, they're supported by the therapist or certain things. Mm-hmm. So they have to work a lot harder. And the second thing was eStim, or electrical stimulation, which are these pads that they'll put on certain parts of the body to wake up the nerves. Mm-hmm. Because Sedona had very low tone, something called hypotonia. So she was very floppy. She couldn't hold herself up very well. Her muscles literally didn't know that they existed. And so they would put like very low frequency electrical pulses while exercising her. And it was like a wake up call to her muscles like, hey, you exist. You need to learn how to contract and flex and work, and it just kind of woke up her body.
That's amazing.
And the third modality is Dr. Catherine Gill, who's out in Santa Monica. She's a pediatric osteopath. I don't even know how to describe her. Jonar doesn't even know how to describe her because
she's like
is
a miracle worker.
Beyond. There's like doctors, and then there's Dr. Gill. She's like a wizard. Like she the entire time, she'd be working on Sedona. You don't see anything happening. And then after 30 minutes, she'll be like, oh, today, we massaged the corpus callosum or the cerebellum or blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, I don't understand what that means. And she's like, oh, I worked on the speech centers, and we're walking out to the parking lot and Sedona makes a new sound. And we're like, what?
Right.
It's
that
like,
quick.
It's so crazy. Like Dr. Gill is so intuitive. And it was like, she would have these like, almost like, I don't even know, like very intuitive conversations with Sedona about what she was willing and not willing to work on and what was hurting and what she could handle. And I don't even know how to describe her, but that lady has gifts.
She is in the right field.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot of steps and all of those, as I'm listening to them, when you're in the midst of, trying to care for a child, that's your main focus. And you just might not know where to start. So just having a place that you could go that would say step by step has got to be will be a relief for parents in the future. And I think it's just an amazing thing. And the name of the foundation is going to be?
So
I love how you just start smiling ear to ear.
I thought of the name because
he made it up.
I didn't really make it up. I think it was already like in the works, and I just so happened to put all of it together. So one of her favorite books was The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and I don't know if you know that story. It's a baby child type of story where at the end the caterpillar turns into this beautiful butterfly. And that was Sedona's favorite story. She, no matter what situation, you could read her that story or she'd hear it on YouTube, she would instantly calm, And so like that kind of embodies the spirit that Sedona had. So the name of the foundation we thought of would be the Sedona Butterfly Effect.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
How can people help you in this journey to make this foundation a full reality? Should they still just donate to the GoFundMe, or is there other ways they can help?
I mean, I think everyone has stuff to contribute. If it's not donations, to extent that you are a CP mom or a NICU mom who has
And CP is cerebral palsy, yeah.
Yeah, if to the extent you have a baby who is at high risk of cerebral palsy, we would love to talk to you. We're running focus groups right now to figure out how we can best serve, this community. Reach out if you have graphic design skills or you have social media skills. Like we will take whatever help we can get.
Yeah, and the help doesn't even have to come in like monetary form, like kind of what Amy was saying, just word of mouth, letting other people know, because that is such a powerful tool in and of itself. And maybe those things will manifest into, maybe they know someone that knows social media that's willing to help us out. That would be huge.
And where can they reach out if they have a skill set to offer? Or we're going to link the GoFundMe, and so that'll be a no-brainer. But where can they reach out if they just want to say, hey, I have this skill set, or hey, I'm a marketing wizard, I can get this out to a bunch of people? How can they reach you?
Yeah, I think they can contact directly us on social media.
Yeah.
DM us, and we check it all the time.
I'm at DRJONARMD on Instagram.
I knew there was going to be an MD in your social media. I felt it in my spirit. What is yours?
On TikTok, I think I'm Amy Wan Esquire, and then I think on Instagram I'm Ms. Amy Wan.
Yeah, MSAMYWAN. Yeah.
Now I have another question. How is your because is your son still 4 or is he 5 now?
He's about to turn 5.
How is he handling all this?
It's been hard on him. I think our son really loved Sedona. And even though she was limited in her mobility, they really got along. Like literally, they would wake up in the mornings and have spitting contests at each other.
That's so cute.
And, Thompson taught Sedona how to slap people in the face. She thought it was so funny. He thought it was so funny. So he's really missing her a lot right now. And so, we are, trying to help him through his grief, but to fully feel it, to not just,
Suppress it. Yeah, we don't want that to happen. He's young, and we've thought long and hard about whether or not we would either keep this information from him or let him process it himself. I think because she was such a big part in all of our lives, including his, that we couldn't not tell him the truth. And, unfortunately, that comes with a cost because he's grieving as we are. But I think it's important for him long term for him to be able to fully process that and transition to a life without her physically present here. So, I mean, that's what we're doing. And we're also trying to just, do normal parent kid things, have him understand that, there's still joy in the world. He can still enjoy life, even though she's gone. We all can. Right.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think a lot of people forget that, and then they dwell in that moment in time and life kind of passes by. So that's amazing. Right. Will you have an aspect of that in your foundation as well that'll help people grieve if that time comes?
We haven't talked about that yet.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it, but I mean, I think it's a good idea to have because Amy and I kind of discussed this previously. Even though she was born, we were grieving throughout the whole process because of things that were out of our control that had, potentially catastrophic results, right? And so I think for any parent out there who's dealing with, the health struggle of their child, they can fully relate to that. And we would love to support them in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, most definitely once we get things going, I mean, that's definitely a component that could be integrated in this all, I think that the other thing too with how Amy kind of described the three wings, I think it's important that, we provide community for these families with their kids because, oftentimes, we had each other, but we felt alone. We felt like there weren't many people out there that could relate to what we were going through. So we want this to also be for the families as much for the kids, that they have this community that's by them to support them, to relate to them on whatever level it is that, whatever they might be going through.
I think just, on the topic of grief, I think a lot of people, I know a lot of people because they've come up and told us, how can it be that you and Jonar are doing this so quickly and, we are taking time to grieve, but I guess it doesn't look like it. And even at, Sedona's celebration of life, Jonar's friend came up to him and he was like, it's crazy, people should be comforting you, but I see you comforting everybody else. And, in some ways, I think in processing this grief, we have tried to find the gift in all of this and have gratitude, right? And so, we could look at this and say, my goodness, she was taken from us so early and it's not fair. And you're right, it's not fair. I wish she could have lived longer, but I'm so glad that she gave us 17 months. I'm so glad that she chose us to be her family. I'm so glad that we are able to do this work in her name. I'm so glad that we got to spend one of each holiday with her, and, the length of life, I think, is not always the most important thing. It's the quality of what you do during it. And so Sedona did so much. She traveled a lot. She had a taste of McDonald's. She went to Disneyland. We did a lot with her, and she showed us amazing strength, and she taught us so much. So for that, we're very grateful.
I'm so touched by you guys just coming and sharing your story. And I agree with Jonar's friend. It does feel like you're comforting. So I feel comforted, and I'm not even, but it's just, I think it's a testament to your strength, your love for one another, and your love for Sedona. I think it's just a beautiful thing, and I can feel all the love. And before I get emotional, we should just probably just go ahead. But I do want to just say thank you for that, because I think, beyond just the medical aspect, just the love that you guys share, the determination you have to spread that love. I think it's such a testament just to the world on every facet. So I appreciate you for sharing that story with the world and coming on the show and being so candid about what you're going through. It's beautiful, and I'm humbly touched, and I'm sure my listeners and our viewers will as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much
we
for
appreciate
having us.
you having us on the show. We really do.
I'm so happy, but I am going to put all the links and the social medias. You guys make sure you reach out. If you don't have kids, you have time. So if you are a graphics person, or if you can do anything that would assist in getting this word out, please do so. Share this podcast. We're having a social media. Share it. Get it to people who might be able to help or might need assistance. So it's very important. Thank you guys again so much, and thank you for being a blessing and a light here in Long Beach. It's truly appreciated, and it sticks with my motto, which if you have to speak a word, make it a good one. We'll see you next time.